We've got a discrepancy in Israeli casualties that I'll try to provide a little context around. And Hamas is back to using drone to drop grenades on Israeli vehicles. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 8 a.m. Central on Monday, December 11th, 2023. Overnight, Israel released the names and images of 8 of their soldiers that they say fell in the line of duty during combat operations in and around the Gaza Strip. Israel additionally is now releasing the wounded information from their side, saying that since October 7th, 1,645 soldiers, military personnel, have been wounded, with 582 of those having been wounded in Gaza. Now, Israeli paper Haaretz put out an article recently saying that there was a pretty wide discrepancy in what the hospitals are reporting in terms of military casualties and what the military is saying. So they said that what they uncovered from the hospital is nearly 2 times as high as what the military has put out. And there's a couple things I want you to keep in mind when you see that piece of data there. So first, patient transfers from one hospital to another are counted twice. So that's already going to be just one little chunk of that number. Second, it's commonplace for soldiers in any military to undergo some level of medical screening after a traumatic event, where the diagnosis very well might be nothing is wrong, get back out to the force. This is something we dealt with on multiple occasions in Iraq and Afghanistan, where a truck would hit an IED. The entire crew would feel fine, but just to be safe, they'd have to go through medical screening. They'd be checked into the hospital, be seen by a provider, and then they might all come back to the unit that afternoon ready to go with no issues. In this case, it's entirely possible that every one of those soldiers undergoing even the slightest level of screening is being counted as a patient for a short period of time in these hospitals. And finally, with the mass mobilization of Israeli reserves, upwards of 360,000 reservists that came into the force, every medical issue is going to be seen as a soldier, as a military event rather than a civilian one. So every sprained ankle, every thrown out back since October 7th is likely being attributed to overall military casualties, which, very well, I guess that's accurate because they're in uniform, they're in service when those things happen, but that wouldn't necessarily reflect accurately the total number of casualties caused by combat operations. Just wanted to bring up that it's to be expected in any conflict that the total number of soldiers seen in a military facility is going to be significantly higher than the number wounded during combat operations, and that, kind of checks out here. The Gaza Health Ministry updated their casualty information, saying that since October 7th, 17,997 Palestinians have so far been killed, with at least 49,229 wounded. A couple notes with that data point. The Gaza Health Ministry is at the very least overseen by Hamas, given that they operate now and previously in Hamas-held territory in Gaza. Additionally, those numbers, the 17,000 and 49,000, also include Hamas militants, but they're not broken out as reported by the Gaza Health Ministry or Al Jazeera. Overnight, Israel said that they're able to kill Ahmad Krikay, the new commander of Hamas's Shajaya battalion. He replaced Wissam Farat, who was killed on December 2nd. So Krikay only had about a week in command before he was located and eliminated. Additionally, the IDF put out a graphic showing the number of senior leaders that they have identified and eliminated since October 7th. This is all focused in northern Gaza right now. I imagine at some point we'll see a similar graphic in the south around Khan Yunis. So with the Hamas Northern Gaza Brigade, Israel says that they've been able to eliminate the brigade commander, his deputy, as well as 3 battalion commanders and 9 company-level commanders. Then in the Gaza Brigade, the IDF says they've eliminated 5 battalion commanders. Now there's 4 up here, but since Farat's replacement was just killed, that makes 5, as well as 15 company-level commanders. Now this kind of whack-a-mole with the leadership of terrorist organizations is something that we've seen a lot of from the United States over the last 20 plus years in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan, and it doesn't work by itself. And I think we've proven that at this point. There has to be another aspect to this. So it is a positive in counterterrorism operations to remove the leadership. It causes some disruptions in their operations and their communications. It's a good thing net overall. However, there has to be another aspect to that long-term plan. So in the case of Israel here, it cannot just be, and it doesn't look like it is right now, the elimination of the high-level leaders. It also has to be the elimination, the capture, the detaining of the lower-level operatives, the fighters out on the street, as well as changing the conditions in Gaza to where Hamas, when the fighting is all done, does not have the ability to kind of come back to anywhere near the same degree of power and authority they had leading up to October 7th. Israel also put out that they continued operations in the Jabalia area up north. They say over the last 24 hours, their elements were able to locate multiple explosive charges, AK-47s, and RPGs hidden in United Nations bags in a private residence. Additionally, they came across a truck full of long-range rockets that was located near a school. And then in a search of that general area, they came across more explosive devices as well as machinery for the production of weapons and a rocket launch site with about 50 launchers, some of which were loaded for launch. Don't think about like big MLRS type launchers in this case. The Qassam rockets, some of the smaller ones, can just be fired off of like essentially a bipod. That's probably, when you hear 50 lined up at once, it's probably the smaller version. Additionally, Israel said that their forces over the past 24 hours in one engagement encountered 2 gunmen. One was immediately killed while the second managed to flee after being wounded. The troops were then directed by a drone overhead to kill the second Hamas terrorist. And Israel says that over the course of the last week, their forces in Jabalia have eliminated at least 50 Hamas gunmen. Israel also put out footage of an aerial resupply taking place in Khan Yunis, which is a little unexpected, to be honest, for a few reasons. Aerial resupply, airdropped supplies into an urban environment is very, very tricky at baseline. And also haven't heard anything about the ground lines of communication being compromised to Israeli forces in the north or the south. So it doesn't seem like there's any challenge at getting supplies to their forces at the front. It looks like, if I had to guess, this is maybe some sort of practice for future operations in other theaters, other areas of the front. I don't think an airdrop to keep the troops supplied at the front in Khan Yunis was the only way to keep those troops in the fight. Then Hamas released some footage yesterday showing combat operations in Khan Yunis, which is the southern portion of the Gaza Strip. They say they've claimed responsibility for more than 20 attacks against Israeli forces all across Gaza in the past 24 hours. Again, a continued uptick in the operational tempo across the front. Additionally, Hamas says that they're able to completely or partially destroy as many as 44 separate Israeli vehicles. And you can see from the footage here, in the south at least, they're able to get very close to Israeli forces in some of these direct fire engagements. They also showed some drone footage dropping a RPG, it looks like, one of these tandem charge RPG warheads modified to be dropped from a drone onto Israeli military vehicles. Haven't seen a lot of this since the opening days of the war. Expected a lot more. But in the first week of Israeli forces moving into Gaza, there was a video that came out of a drone dropping what looked like just kind of a standard hand grenade. This is only the second video I've seen of Hamas successfully using drones to drop and detonate warheads on top of Israeli military vehicles. So Israel's starting to come under a little bit of heat for some pictures and videos that were making the rounds earlier this week of Palestinian prisoners that were taken captive in Gaza. So there was a good article covering this in the Times of Israel where they say, quote, images of Palestinian men in Gaza being rounded up by troops and stripped to their underwear in recent days have sparked concerns about Israel's arrest procedures in the enclave and questions over possible rights violations or humiliating treatment. So again, I'm not going to show the pictures and videos here. We're going to get into that, one of the reasons why here in a moment. But these were spread far and wide, all across social media. Multiple major news outlets picked these up and showed them to their audience. The article continues saying, quote, the Israeli military has confirmed arresting hundreds, but the military has also indicated that many of those it detained were later released. And officials have indicated that soldiers may be operating under a guideline of arrest first and question later. That's not crazy in the least. In a combat operation, in a combat environment, in an urban setting like Gaza, where you're dealing with a terrorist organization, guerrilla fighters, unconventional warfare, the detaining military-age males first and then asking questions and then screening them after is far from crazy. That's pretty close to standard operating procedures in a lot of ways. Now, there's a line there where you can't just arrest every single person you ever see. You're going to make the situation worse than had you not done that in the first place. But hearing that it's an arrest first, ask questions later policy is pretty in line with this type of combat operation. They continue saying, Israel's national security advisor said suspects need to be searched to ensure they're not carrying weapons or explosives, but that the pictures of them in their underwear serve nobody, and he expected the distribution by Israel of such photos would cease. There's documentation going on left and right, especially in modern day military operations. There are going to be pictures of just about everything and videos of just about everything. Most of those are not going to be released. Most of those are just for documentation for the various military forces. This is one of those where it's not crazy that Israel would have the pictures and videos of them taking these men into detention. The fact that they were released publicly was interesting. I would not have expected that. They say, according to Israel's Channel 12 News on Sunday, some 700 people have been detained, 60% of whom have been determined to not be terrorists, not associated with Hamas. Haaretz, citing the assessment of senior defense officials, reported that only 10 to 15% of the arrested men are thought to be affiliated with Hamas. So, got it. Good. That checks out, right? It's not every single military-age male, not every single man in Gaza is affiliated with Hamas. So whether it's 10 to 15% or upwards of 60, as is reported here. Either way, it does sound like, as Israel was putting out previously, once they go through that screening, they are releasing those not identified as related to Hamas back out into the public. And then wrapping up here, and kind of the reason that I think it's not worth showing some of these pictures, they say under the Geneva Conventions, it is unlawful to expose prisoners of war to public curiosity in order to preserve their dignity and to protect them from public identification and retribution. We've struggled with this, I think, all people, in the last little while here with the advent of social media. The Russian war in Ukraine, there has been a shocking volume of pictures and videos shown of prisoners of war. I don't think that's the right thing to do, to blast it out over the internet. I'm not going to show it here, and there's a reason for that. It's not just a moral reason, but you also get into potential violations of the Geneva Conventions. Either way, it does look like, I would imagine Israel is going to change up their procedures with how they detain and process some of these individuals in Gaza. It's not going to stop anytime soon, just given the volume of territory that still needs to be cleared and just how many people, how many civilians, and how many Hamas terrorists remain in and around the Gaza Strip. I would expect that we're not going to see as many pictures like this making it out into the public going forward. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out the sit reps I put out on Substack. Link is in the description below. Substack now also has ad-free, sponsor-free videos that go live about 1 hour before they're up on YouTube. But thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.